when the lottery came about, everybody picked up some more flights, and we're just real happy that we were fortunate enough to pick some up, you know, to be able to service this market.
Swimming pool inspections in Oklahoma City take up a lot of time, but officials from the city-county health department say the inspections can make the difference between life and death. There are about 900 pools that have to be inspected in 500 locations. This must be done every 10 days if possible to ensure pool operators don't become careless following safety requirements. And for the most part, public swimming pools in the area are passing the tests.
Well, I feel Oklahoma City pool situation is in real good shape this summer. We've got 10 people in the field working the 900 pools that we have in Oklahoma City, and they're getting to them about every 10 days. And compliance has been excellent this summer. The managers are working with us, the property managers are working with us, and our problems have just not been very as bad as they were last summer.
Stanfield says there are no guarantees that accidents won't happen as a result of the inspections. However, he does feel swimming pool inspections should always be a part of the summer season. Ed Stewart, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City. For Mrs. Robert Nicholas, Putnam Heights is more than just a neighborhood. It's history. And for that reason, she is happy that Putnam Heights has been added to the National Register of Historical Places. The area is bounded by Classen, Georgia, Northwest 36th, and Northwest 38th. Mrs. Nicholas says these houses built between 1908 and 1930 once were the homes of Oklahoma's most prominent citizens. And it was persistence that helped get Putnam Heights recognized.
I think that anyone who thinks it's easy, you know, it's not. And it makes you more proud because you know it's not something they hand out to just anyone.
It doesn't take long to see the neighborhood does have a style all its own. These homes were built to give the area a personality that would fit its occupants. At one time, Oklahoma Governor J.B.A. Robertson stayed here. Even the home of Israel Putnam still stands. It was Putnam who founded the neighborhood and stayed here himself. Putnam Heights residents say they believe in what Putnam was trying to express. Ed Stewart, Action 4 in Putnam Heights.
We agreed that consistency, clarity, and steadiness of purpose were essential to success. It was in this spirit that I undertook to serve you as Secretary of State. In recent months, it has become clear to me that the foreign policy on which we embarked together was shifting from that careful course which we laid out. Necessary to request that you accept my resignation.
Attorney Lana Tyree spent the day attacking the restrictions the Moore School District put on Moore residents to examine records of the school district. Tyree called the restrictions the two-person, one-document rule. Under the district's procedure, only 2 people at a time have access to records. Between the 2 of them, they can only see 1 document at a time. Leon Bewley, the district's associate superintendent, spent more than 2 hours on the stand. Tyree questioned him about the system used to index the records. The district's records are voluminous, and figuring out how to find a document is no easy task. Under questioning, district employees said they had been told not to volunteer help to anyone wanting records. Tyree argued that the district's restrictions were unreasonable.
And it is our position, Your Honor, that the public is the owner of these records, the public is the financier of this school district, and that the school district is but the custodian for the benefit of the public. Public records, traditionally in Oklahoma, have been held to a high regard, and the right of the access of the public is at all times liberally and broadly construed.
The witnesses called by the plaintiff in this case who want to see certain records are fishing for grounds to discredit administrators. I think that's clear. It would be a sham to come up in front of this court and say that these fishing expeditions are unconnected with the termination of 6 principals. When Ms. Tyree talks about good faith, how about the good faith of owning up to that?
Judge Edward McDaniel agreed with Tyree. He ruled the district's restrictions were not appropriate. He asked more citizens to be reasonable in requesting documents in the future, and he asked district employees to be helpful in assisting them. Bill Ross, Action 4 at the Cleveland County Courthouse.
Everything's quiet at Putnam City High School right now. The school's 1,400 students won't be back for another 2 months. The slow season will give workmen time to finish some important repairs to the school's auditorium. Parts of the auditorium are covered with deadly asbestos. The sound-deadening material was installed to help the wall's acoustics. But in recent years, researchers have discovered that people exposed to asbestos for long periods of time frequently develop lung diseases or rare forms of cancer. Health experts aren't sure that brief exposure to asbestos will cause serious disease. However, they're not taking any chances.
There's very little known about what the exact effects or the risk is to the very low levels of exposure such as we might have in a school building that has friable asbestos ceilings. However, we think it's prudent to remove that asbestos from that building so that the asbestos is no longer there, and therefore the risk is no longer there.
All of the asbestos should be gone here from the Putnam City High School auditorium before school resumes in late August. And the state legislature has already been asked for another $2 million to help with the asbestos removal in other schools across Oklahoma. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in the Putnam City High School.
This is the last place a death row inmate who's going to be executed will sleep. It's the execution area holding cell. On his execution date, an inmate will be taken to the execution chamber. He'll be strapped onto a stretcher and receive a lethal injection. But that procedure has never been used in Oklahoma. There hasn't been an execution in this state since 1966, and these men on death row may never have to face the sentence given to them by a jury of their peers. Larry Chaney is the latest example. Chaney was scheduled to be executed on July 12th for the 1977 killing of a Jinx woman. But now, 5 years later, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals has granted a stay of execution.
The thing that bothers me is that a death sentence is not handed down lightly by a jury. It's hard to qualify a jury for a death penalty. That jury has to have the intestinal fortitude to come back in, find that person guilty, and look the person in the eye in the courtroom and sentence them to death. It's a tough job for a prosecutor to obtain a death penalty, and I'm sure judges don't relish handing down a death penalty. But we go through all of this and get the death penalty in those cases where it's deserved, and only to find that we're then the will of the court, of the people, of the jury is then frustrated by appellate courts.
Macy said a person given the death sentence by an Oklahoma County jury can be expected to live at least 5 years. And there's more than a 90% chance he'll never be executed. Bill Ross, Action 4 at the Oklahoma County Courthouse.
Using trained dogs in the military has been well worth the hours of work involved to prepare the dogs for duty. Some of the dogs are trained for seeking out explosives, while others specialize in locating illegal drugs. Many officials credit the presence of dogs when it comes to discouraging drug use on military bases. There are times when the dogs can outperform man.
For instance, a drug dog. Recently, we had a crank call that there was a bomb in a building, and so we used the bomb dog to go through the building in about an hour, where if we had to go room-to-room search just using manpower, it would probably take 2 or 3 hours. And we had 400 people working in that building, so it was very important to get the bomb search done as fast as possible and get those people back to work.
Before a dog is certified, it must go through at least 18 weeks of school, with each dog having its own trainer. Every day, the military dogs are tested in different areas and worked until the trainers are satisfied. All military bases around the world are begging for good patrol dogs. Traditionally, only German Shepherds have been used. However, lately, breed has not mattered, as long as the dog can get the job done right. Ed Stewart, Action 4 at Tinker Air Force Base.
This 4th of July, have a blast with the family by taking safety precautions. Carelessness can cause the weekend fun to blow up. Start it off right by buying your fireworks legally, which isn't as simple as it sounds.
We would urge that anyone who is going to buy fireworks go to one of the legal stands outside of the city. By the way, we don't know of any illegal ones inside the city or they wouldn't be there. But go to one of the stands outside the city. Shoot them outside the city, and it would probably help you if you could call someone that you may know in the city or someone in city government to find out where the city limits may be so that you know that you'd be legal.
When choosing from the wide variety of explosives, keep in mind who will be handling them. These new firecrackers are very popular and fairly safe. The most popular of them all, for children, is unfortunately the most dangerous. Sparklers heat up to over 1,200 degrees. It's no coincidence that every year children are brought into emergency rooms with nasty burns. But even these can be safe if a few rules of caution are followed. First of all, keep a safe distance from the fireworks. If you have children, handle the fireworks yourself. And always, always keep safety in mind. These 3 add up to a safe and fun 4th of July. Sherry Sellers, Action 4.
Memorial services were held today for Cyril and Christine Orbach. The 87-year-old businessman and his wife were brutally murdered in their home on Thursday. Autopsy reports indicate the couple died from blows to their heads and throat wounds. While the service was in progress, city police were developing their first substantial lead in the 3-day-old investigation.
We've received information from someone in the neighborhood which leads us to believe that the suspect was seen by a vehicle which passed by the house and seen the suspect in the victim's car. We're working on a further description on the suspect at this time.
Although only one suspect was seen, police have not ruled out that more people may have been involved. Investigations at the scene so far have turned up nothing substantial, and police are asking for help from anyone who may have been in the area and may also have seen the suspect leaving. In the meantime, investigators are working on a composite drawing of the person seen in the victim's car. That should be completed late tonight or tomorrow morning. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
We've had probably between 50 and 100 calls today alone, and some of them are real valid information that we need to check out further, and some of them are just possible sightings. We've gotten a couple of calls from people that we would really give a lot of priority to their information, and it is being checked out.
In view of our heavily involvement in the oil business, that we're probably experiencing more problems than some banks.
The bank's chairman of the board, Bill Jennings, was right. Penn Square Bank was indeed having more problems than other banks. Their problems were so bad that on Monday night, Penn Square Bank was no more. The controller of the currency had declared Oklahoma's fourth largest bank, with more than $500 million in assets, insolvent. Bank management huddled with FDIC officials throughout the evening, while bank employees were called in to hear the bad news. Federal employees began moving in their own supplies. The FDIC will process the bank's accounts until the institution can be closed. Depositors with less than $100,000 in the bank will be assured of getting their money back. Deposits of more than $100,000 will be considered as claims against the bank. Penn Square Bank had been heavily involved in oil and gas financing. 80% of the bank's outstanding loans were to energy-related companies. As the oil industry slumped, the bank's financial situation deteriorated. As late as Friday, the bank's chairman of the board, Bill Jennings, had been confident about the bank's survival.
Contrary to anything you might heard from rumors, we are open for business tomorrow as usual, and we'll be here Tuesday morning in business.
But Jennings' optimism proved unfounded. The bank that opens for business Tuesday won't be Penn Square Bank. It will be the FDIC-run Deposit Insurance National Bank of Oklahoma City. Bill Ross, Action 4 at the Penn Square Mall.
Penn Square Bank is the first major bank in the country since 1969 to go through total liquidation. All of the bank's holdings will be dissolved. And many banks across the country face similar problems. High interest rates and other economic indicators make lending money a tricky business, especially in an unpredictable one like the oil and gas industry. But according to Robert Harris, Executive Vice President of the Oklahoma Bankers Association, anytime you risk 80% of your lending power in any one venture, you take the chance of losing it all.
Penn Square reportedly had an 80% concentration of its loans in one area, that being oil and gas. That's extremely unusual. In most banks, you find a wide diversity in the loan portfolio so that if problems are encountered in any business sector, they can tend to handle those problems without really substantially impacting the bank.
This is the United Oklahoma Bank. They, too, are a heavy investor in Oklahoma's oil industry. But the main difference is that this bank has about 20% of its assets tied up in oil, not 80%. The rest is diversified among other industries. The management here is aware of Penn Square Bank's problems, and they agree the trick to banking is diversity.
I don't think that there'll be significant change towards the way the banks in Oklahoma City look at their oil and gas loans, because they've looked at them differently in the past. It'll probably cause people to ponder a little bit and maybe ask more questions, particularly at the executive management level over loans. But the lending practices of most banks in Oklahoma City have been, I think, pretty prudent anyway.
This bank and many others across the state will continue to invest heavily in the oil and gas business. But according to bank officials, loan officers will be a little more conscious about the oil industry and its limitations. Kurt Autry, Action 4.
Flipped it on the other side of the road, evidently overcompensated when she hit the mud and hit the pole.
Nearly a year after their daughters disappeared, Norma Pallett and Perla Peterson are looking for them at the World's Fair in Knoxville. Cinda and Charlotte disappeared September 26 from the Oklahoma State Fair. This picture of the two girls was taken just hours before they were abducted by a man Oklahoma City police believe looked like this. The search has been long and tiring for the two mothers and one sister, but even as the time drags on, they are far from giving up hope.
It gets a little depressing, I'll admit that, but you just don't lose hope of finding your kids.
Their task is hard. Their faces are brave and impassive as they share the news of their tragic loss. There are moments of forced smiles, but it is impossible to hold back the tears.
To do that. I try.
I know these are hard questions. Is there anything that you would like to tell the people out there in hopes of finding Charlotte and Cinda?
They act as if it were their own. Try to imagine themselves in our position and what they would do, and that it could possibly be their own someday.
But that's something fairgoers don't want to hear. With the bad news of two Oklahoma City girls comes the fact that 100,000 children like Cinda and Charlotte disappear every year. The search for them has crisscrossed the country and meant thousands of police hours. For the families, the search won't end until Cinda and Charlotte are back home. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
On the left, huh? As a result of certain allegations reported to this office, an investigation has been initiated today by the FBI concerning alleged criminal misconduct with regard to certain activities at the Penn Square Bank. It is anticipated that this investigation will be lengthy and complex in nature, involving violations of federal law such as the misappropriation, misapplication, and embezzlement of funds by an officer of the bank, as well as the making of false statements to the bank by borrowers in order to secure credit.
Mr. Rader's had some major goals in life, and one of the goals was to complete the teaching hospitals. Except for the projects in the teaching hospitals and the many wild allegations that have been made, he probably would have retired much earlier. He's talked about retirement a number of times.
State Auditor and Inspector Tom Daxon made public 9 months of work concerning a special audit. The Republican candidate for governor says the audit of the Department of Human Services shows a number of irregularities. Daxon told reporters DHS apparently didn't follow state law regarding competitive bidding, and he asked DHS Director Lloyd Rader could be involved.
The report which we are releasing today is a result of one of those special audits. It shows a systematic pattern of manipulation of the state bidding process to throw contracts for the purchase of various types of equipment to H&C Equipment Company of Hinton, Oklahoma. There is a considerable amount of evidence that Lloyd Rader was directly involved in those manipulations.
And the audit says manipulations came by using overly detailed specifications to discourage competitors of H&C Equipment Company. For example, if a piston was the wrong size in a tractor, the bid for that company was thrown out. H&C sold the state mainly Macy Ferguson equipment. Secondly, the audit questions why orders for equipment were canceled from the low-bidding company when the company was not H&C. In a copy of a letter from DHS, the cancellation was allegedly signed by Lloyd Rader. Daxon says split invoicing was done. In other words, receipts showed 4 purchases were made from H&C on different days to avoid competitive bidding, when actually everything was delivered on the same day. And finally, a major charge is that DHS used emergency procedures to buy road equipment when there was no real emergency, and items were only bought from H&C. In just about 1 year, H&C sold more than $357,000 of equipment to the state. Daxon never did say who are the DHS officials that may have violated state law. He says he's going to leave that up to the district attorney and attorney general's office. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
Question first because it leads, the answer leads into the first question. The short answer is that at best, this bank engaged in shoddy, speculative banking practices. Its problems were not due principally to the economy or even the decline in energy prices. Its problems were the result of loans which should never have been made at the values placed on them. The bank's growth rate was excessive, causing extensive reliance on volatile and expensive funds borrowed in national money markets. There was a complete lack of diversification in the loan portfolio. In a word, the problems of this institution were
to relieve. In other words, there's an ancillary question I was going to ask later, and I can delay it to give you an opportunity to answer the first one, and that is,
It will be a year next month since President Reagan fired more than 12,000 striking air traffic controllers. The strike caused disruption in air travel for several weeks. Controllers said they wanted the system to change because it was unsafe, and they were willing to lose their jobs to prove their point. This is being called the anniversary graduation class of controller trainees. It's the FAA's way of showing the public the controller situation is back to normal in the U.S. 219 people enrolled in this class last April, and 155 were able to complete the training courses necessary for a degree. These students dispute the charges that the training is done quickly in order to replace fired controllers.
I'm a college graduate and I hold a degree in nursing, and this is by far the most difficult school I've ever been through. And I feel like we were adequately prepared to go into the field, and of course we're going to learn more about the job when we get to our facilities, but I feel the training was adequate, and we had very good instructors and just a good bunch of students to work with. I'm real pleased.
Every 2 weeks, about 288 students start classes. Graduation from the academy is only one phase of training. The students now go to different control towers around the country, where instruction will continue. Ed Stewart, Action 4 at the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center.